everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello.
It's exercise day.
Guess what I did today?
You didn't.
I exercised.
Good for you. Was it you were inspired?
Well, I felt like I couldn't talk about exercising if I didn't do it that day.
Well, I have mine on my calendar for right when we're finished, so I feel like I'm okay too.
Yeah, right on. So I felt like, I had to make sure I got my workout in this morning, and I did.
That's
so
good.
It was good.
That's good. You feel
Yeah.
better after it.
You do, definitely.
Well, we kicked off our conversation on self-care and ADHD last week, and we promised at that time to talk about the role of physical fitness and ADHD this week. So here we are. But before we do that, head over to TakeControlADHD.com, listen to the show right there on the website, or subscribe to the mailing list and get the latest episode every week. You can connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at TakeControlADHD, and you could always call us, leave us a voicemail at 503-664-4ADD to get your voice and your questions on this very show. All right, so here we are, exercise and ADHD.
So I have to tell you before I get started on my big old spiel here.
Yeah, spiel.
Is when I was doing the outline for the show, I kept having this like flashback of this video in my mind. Any guesses of what it would be?
Oh my goodness. All I can think about right now is the movie Xanadu with Olivia Newton-John.
Oh, you're so close. Olivia Newton-John.
Let's get physical.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So I'm doing you were really close. So
that is so funny. Why would I go to roller skating Olivia Newton-John when there's such an obvious, more immediate connection? That's
where
really
she's
funny.
doing like aerobics.
Yes.
Yeah, and she's, getting physical. So yeah, it was really funny. I'm typing up the outline and I'm just like, I can't get her off of my mind. I can't get her out of my mind.
That's really funny.
Yeah, it is funny. So anyway, I just had to say that. We'll put that aside.
Now I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah, now that everybody's thinking about Olivia Newton-John and getting physical.
And singing it. I'm sure they're singing it. Stop singing it, people.
I know,
don't do it any favors. It'll be with you forever.
That's right. All right. So exercise, it's the first, outside of last week when we were kind of talking about our vision and stuff around self-care and what it means, it really is kind of the first topic to talk about because it's probably one of the most important, all of these things are important. I don't want to discredit anything, but exercise is definitely really up there on the list that if you're going to make time or get started on any of these things, and we always talk about starting small, starting with one thing at a time, exercise is probably a good place to start, wouldn't you think?
Oh, yes, I do. And you know what? The other thing I think about is, we talked about forgetting what it means to feel good. I think once you start again, you remember pretty quickly.
Yes.
It makes a real impact almost immediately. Well,
yeah,
it hurts
really
probably a little bit, and then it feels better.
Especially that next day or the second day, right? Like,
right.
Yes. Well, and there's also a lot of guilt, I think, that's wrapped up into exercise. At least I know it is for me. There's always this sort of nagging, I should exercise. And I think that for me, the shift came where it wasn't about losing weight. It was more about how I feel. And like you said, it's more about, remembering how it feels to just feel good. And when you start kind of shifting the reasons why you're losing or not losing weight, Sam, subconsciously, I'm like, lose weight, Nikki. But, when you start kind of shifting the way you think about it, that no, it's really just a way for me to feel good, to get energy. It's a great stress releaser. You start to really think about what all the great benefits, and it's not just about weight. It's not just about how you look. It starts to be a little bit easier, I think, to be a little easier on yourself. Like, so if you miss a day, it's not like the end of the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and this was the thing we talked about before, which is that the easiest way to find, and I really like how you say that it's not about weight, because really physiologically it's also not about weight, right? It's about tone and muscle and fitness and bone and joint, but weight you handle most directly through nutrition, through what you eat. Exercise is different. And if you separate that and you think, oh, I'm going to go run because I'm going to lose weight. If you think that way, you're not going to lose weight. That's not why you do it.
Such a good point. Because there is that statistic that says, I think 80% of that is your nutrition, or losing weight is about 80% of what you eat. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not going to happen. Well, and I think it's interesting because we go into thinking, at least again, I can only talk for myself. I have these great intentions. It's Monday morning. I'm going to get up. I'm going to go do this. And it doesn't happen. And I think that for me, one of the reasons it doesn't happen is I always kind of feel like something else is more important.
Yeah.
And it usually, to be all honest, it's my work. And so my office draws me and I'm like, oh, I got to write that blog post, or you know what? Got to plan for that podcast. So that becomes more important than getting the exercise in. But then I'm reminded, exactly like this morning, when I actually made the point to make sure I got the exercise in before I recorded the podcast, that it really doesn't take that much time.
No.
It really didn't. And I don't exercise for an hour or 2 hours. I exercise for 30 minutes. And, by golly, I did the exercise. I still was able to shower and get into the office and plan for the podcast and do what I needed to do, to be ready here for you. And it all worked.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I am often surprised by how ridiculous my assumptions of time become around exercise, because when I think about exercising, I look at my calendar, I think, well, that's half my day. Like the visual that occurs in my head is,
it feels that way.
4 hours of my day, and then I'm lost. But it really doesn't. It really, really doesn't. When you start scheduling it every day and you realize the impact, and we're talking about the impact of exercise on ADHD, the ability. And I'll let you get into the details on this, which is, the ability for me when I'm exercising every day, the ability for me to focus and be productive and get things done goes up so significantly that the cost of 40 minutes, 50 minutes a day is absolutely negligible.
Mm. Well, you lead in to some wonderful, real science, statistics. About why that is. Yeah. So when we exercise, we are exercising our brain along with our body, right? And so I found this article that really had a great way of explaining it, and we'll attach it to the show notes. And it's from Everyday Health. And what they say is that, the exercise actually does the same thing as ADHD medication. So the challenge is that the effects of exercise only last for a few hours following the activity. Since it's not always possible, right? We can't exercise multiple times a day. Other interventions like medication can be helpful. So it's kind of like this puzzle of when you're looking at how do I best take care of my ADHD, there's many components to it, but exercise really needs to be part of that component, because it can be just like taking medication. You get both of those things together and, and I'm not saying, one way or the other, but it's there. And I want people to know about it, that it matters, these two things together can really make a difference. So what happens is when you exercise, your brain releases, not releases. That's not even a word, Pete. Your brain releases several important chemicals like endorphins, dopamine, serotonin. And these are the brain chemicals that affect your focus, which is what you're talking about, attention. And all of these are in short supply with people that have ADHD. So when you're exercising, these endorphins, they produce these feel-good chemicals. So not only are you really helping yourself focus and be more productive that day, you're also fighting depression and dealing with stress in a really healthy way versus, going and taking a drink of alcohol in the middle of the day when you should not be doing it. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, but it's really dealing with stress in a healthy way too. And it's also really good for people who have the hyperactive or the hyperactive type of ADHD, right? So when you're looking at the H and ADD, this releases some of their excess energy, which is really important. And, we've talked about this before when we've talked about children with ADHD, that one of the worst things a teacher can really do is take away recess. for a consequence of a bad behavior or whatever, you want to actually send them out for probably more recess, which doesn't make sense to some people, but to that child who has that hyperactivity, it does make sense.
Well, and luckily, I mean, and we're seeing more and more writing being done in the sort of communities of educators around, understanding ADHD in the classroom. And I think the same thing applies to adults at work. Like, you sit down in a meeting and you find you're restless and fidgeting and you can't settle it. That's where it's really appropriate to run to the bathroom, change into your sweats, go for a half-hour run at lunch.
Right, absolutely.
And then come back to work and be settled for a good afternoon.
Yeah.
How can you make those are accommodations, just like we have accommodations in the classroom for our kids. There are accommodations you have to make for yourself around, how you can burn off that excess energy if you find that you're having the crazies.
Absolutely. Well, and something I just want to reiterate that it's not something that you have to do for 2 hours a day. Like you said, it doesn't take a half a day for you to work out. You can get all of these benefits that we're talking about with just, exercising 30 minutes a day. And it can be just walking. It can be, weightlifting. It can be anything that you want it to be. Yeah. And I think that part of the problem with ADHD is that you get bored easily. It's easier to get bored by just taking a walk or whatever. So there's got to be some ways that you make the exercising a little bit more interesting, so that could be definitely like switching it up, listening to your favorite podcast when you're on your walk, listening to us.
I was just going to say that. That was going to be I'm so glad you got there.
We're your favorite podcast.
We are your favorite podcast.
Yeah, I got to throw that out there. But those are the things you got to make it exciting because your brain is wired for excitement, not boredom. And so, if you're talking about how do I get exercise in, how do I make this happen for you? That's one of the things you have to look at is what do you enjoy doing? What do you love doing? And doing more of that than doing the boring stuff like walking on a treadmill. May not excite you. There was a previous blog post that, I guess I probably wrote it, 2 or 3 months ago, but it was 10 tips on how to fit exercise into your daily routine. And I'd like to cover some of those today because we are talking about exercise. What do you think?
All right. I like it.
Yeah. So, and we'll make we'll put the link of this blog post into the show notes as well, so you can actually see it.
Yeah.
But
this is one you wrote, right?
This is one that I wrote.
One that we wrote. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. And the first thing on there is scheduling it, really having a plan of when it's going to happen. It's so easy to just think, okay, I'm going to exercise 3 times this week, but then the end of the week happens and you never did it. So you really have to be a little bit more intentional, and schedule it, be committed to that time. Have an accountability partner with you, either go walking with them or meet them at the gym or have a trainer if you can afford it. These kinds of things are really building into your structure of making this happen for you, right? So you're really setting yourself up for success when you do something like that. And I think that the next thing to that is once you're there, once you show up, again, you don't have to do it for an hour or 2 hours. Just do something. Maybe it's just a 10-minute walk, just to get started, especially for those of you out there that haven't exercised for a while. It doesn't make sense for you to go out and try to exercise, for an hour. So just start with 10 minutes, just start with 15 minutes. And then the next day, add 5 minutes or even add just a minute. You're going to slowly eventually get up to the point where you want to be at. And you kind of want to minimally be at that 30-minute mark if you can. So work yourself up, to that. One of the things that really helps me is just having my clothes ready to go. I know that sounds really silly, but just having them laid out, then it just is one less step I have to do in the morning. So anything.
No, I think that can become an incredible roadblock. Are you kidding? Just laundry. Laundry is a terrible roadblock.
Well, and if you're going to listen to a podcast and there's a specific podcast you want to listen to, like a specific show or episode of Taking Control of the ADHD podcast, have that planned out. like know which show you're going to listen to, because that throws me for a loop too. When I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to a podcast, and I've got probably 4 or 5 of them that I listen to, and I don't know which one I want to listen to. And so then I start scrolling down the feed, which one looks interesting? Well, how long is it? That takes a lot of time.
Yeah, right.
So the more you can kind of pre-plan that, I think, again, you're setting yourself up for success. We already talked about doing something different, something new, making sure that you're doing something that's of interest to you is definitely going to make a huge difference. And I think the last thing I have to say about this is tracking your results. And it's not just the weight loss, right? It's not just the number that you're seeing on the scale, but it's really tracking how you're feeling. And we mentioned this before, how we're falling into that trap that we're forgetting what it feels like to feel good. So let's document that. Let's write about it, put it somewhere that it feels really good today that I got this 30-minute walk, and, just track how you're feeling. And eventually you're going to notice that, your jeans are a little lighter or a little less tight. And, you're going to notice these things, all of the benefits that you're looking for. But, I just think it's important that you're paying attention to that so you can kind of see your progress as you go along.
Yeah, we've gotten some feedback, and some feedback that I'm working into the digital show that we're going to be talking about with this series in several weeks, about just sort of data collection. But I just have to go back to this idea of the daily journal, of taking the time to jot down just a few sentences of what you're feeling, and keep it in one place. If that's a digital thing like day one we've talked about, or if it's just getting yourself a nice journal. Just write a few sentences about where you start each day and where you end each day, or draw a little face, a smiley face or a frowny face or something that gives you a sense of your progress. Because I guarantee when you go back and look at that after 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks, you'll notice a trend. You will start feeling better. And it's not just about, like you said, it's not just about the weight. Although, boy, am I excited to talk about a little tech tool that entered my house.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned for that. So I just think having that sort of documentation can be incredibly motivating.
Absolutely. So one piece of this that I want to talk about that I think is important is backsliding. And we've talked about backsliding in regards to organizing. You've organized a space, and then all of a sudden it's kind of come back to being disorganized. And it's sort of the same thing with exercise. You've been maybe really consistent with your exercise routine, and then you've had a few days or a couple days or a week, maybe you went on vacation or whatever, where your routine just sort of went away. Mm-hmm. And, I'm guilty of this, and I'm sure many listeners are too, that there's a lot of shame that's attached to that. You feel bad, it's like, oh man, Christmas was here and I ate too many cookies, and
oh, hallelujah. That's exactly. Hallelujah past the eggnog.
Oh, of course. Well, it's one more day until New Year's. I'll just go ahead and eat all of this, chili cheese dip.
Yeah, but then it's New Year's Day, and everybody's I gotta have some soothing comfort food because I treated myself so poorly the night before.
Exactly. So there's a lot, shame that's attached to this, and again, kind of tying into the ADHD. ADHD can sometimes really make you kind of think black or white. There's no gray, right? So it's kind of like you're all in or you're nothing. And so some people can easily feel like, well, I've already messed up, so you know what? I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I've tried. I never succeed. And then what starts happening is these old beliefs that we've talked about, these old tapes that are in our head that just start beating ourselves up. And so we want to stop that, right? So backsliding, just like in organizing, is probably going to happen in your self-care, with ADHD. It probably just expect it to happen. So first thing I would say is be aware of how you're talking to yourself. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Your old beliefs don't serve you. So let's think about what would serve you. How can you be kinder to yourself? And just kind of, reminding yourself that I can't change what I did last week, but I do have control of what I do today. Mm-hmm. I have control over my next meal. I have control over how much water I'm going to drink today, and really just kind of zeroing it back into where you are right now. So there's a little bit of mindfulness in that, right?
Yes.
Really being in the moment of where you are and what choice am I going to make today? And I just love that tomorrow is a new day and we get another chance. I mean, that's one of the wonders of life, right? Is we get another chance. And so, what can you do to make yourself feel better?
I like to break that down even to the minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I just ate that cookie. I just had no reason. I went in and I snuck a cookie or a big piece of chocolate or something stupid. I didn't need it. I wasn't hungry. But you know what? That was like last minute.
Yes.
That was something I just did. And you know what? Now I recognize it immediately. I know that was not the right thing to do. I'm going to make a different decision. I'm not going to take the next bite.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And that is especially true. I mean, I know we're talking about food right now, but I think that's especially true on food that isn't good for you, but you don't even really like. Mm-hmm. I think that when you're kind of on a mission that I'm going to start taking better care of myself, that you're more aware of that food and stay away from it. Like if I'm going to indulge, I'm going to indulge on something that I really like, not on something that's just like, but I'm going to eat it anyway. Right. So yeah, I mean, I think that awareness is important.
My dad had this chemical that his nutritionist gave him at one point. It was just a little like homeopathic thing, or I don't know if you'd even call it a homeopathic. It was just a thing that you put a few drops on your tongue, and then for some period, like a couple of hours after, it would change the balance, the chemical balance in your mouth, so that whenever you ate sugar, it would taste like dirt.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah,
wow.
It's like behavior modification with these sort of natural chemicals. And it would absolutely kick your cravings for sugar because it didn't hit that.
It didn't taste
dopamine.
Good.
It didn't taste good. It didn't give you that push. So you would end up eating things that did taste good to you, which was anything that didn't have sugar. Like those are the kinds of like behavior modifications that I appreciate, which are the things that you just introduce into your system and they push you in a new direction.
Yes, it's like putting like vinegar or something in your fingernails so that you won't bite your fingernails.
Yeah, right. Sometimes you just have to do that. It's just the reminder. Like you're quitting smoking, right? I never smoked, but I see people with rubber bands. When they crave a cigarette they put a rubber band around the wrist and snap it. So it's like that little. That was really popular, I think, in the 80s. I'm not sure they do that anymore. That sort of pain penitence, pain therapy. But anyway.
Yeah, we'll stay away from that.
Stay away from pain therapy.
Well, another really good strategy, I think, is this 3-day rule that is really great to implement if you're putting a lot of time and intention into this exercise program, that after the 3rd day of missing your exercise workout, just knowing that on that 4th day, you have to do it. Like there is just no excuse, even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes, because what typically happens is that after the 4th day, then you really tend to get into that backsliding momentum. And so, I would just be aware of the calendar. If you missed your workout on Monday and Wednesday, just make sure you're doing it on Friday, make sure you're doing it over the weekend or however you've decided your schedule. But, that 4th day is pretty important. So you want to be aware of that. And again, I just want to emphasize, it's just doing anything, even just for 10 minutes, it gets you going. We've already talked about the accountability partner. I think that's huge. I mean, this show was an accountability partner for me today. Like, okay, I'm going to do it, right? Because I need to be able to tell you listeners I worked out today.
That's right.
Not
Good
that
for
you probably care, but yeah, there you go. The other tip that I had that I think is really important is, if you can't exercise that day for whatever reason, that, you go back to focusing on your nutrition. Because if you can have a great day where, you got a lot of water in and you ate well and you didn't exercise, it's not going to affect you that much. It's going to be okay. So, if you can't get to the gym, just really focus on your nutrition that day rather than have it be an all or nothing. You don't have to eat really poorly just because you didn't work out that day.
That's huge. That was the real sort of in terms of tracking data. Again, I don't want to focus too much on that, but in terms of tracking data, when I started keeping a food journal and tracking the calories that I was taking in, and the app that I was using would give me the calorie credit when it sensed that I did some exercise.
Right.
That ends up being amazing as a motivator when you see that, you know what, I can actually eat more when I exercise, and I have to eat more when I exercise, right?
Right.
I get to have, I'm like buying myself some sense of satisfaction there if I go out and exercise really well. But on the same front, to your point, if I don't exercise, at least I know what I'm missing.
Right.
And I know how to make the right decisions because I know the gap that I won't be able to fill that would have existed had I gone out and worked out. So anyway, that's big stuff.
Well, I would love to hear from other people because I think that this, a lot of people out there, this is really important to them. There's several clients that I talk to that, I have to get my running in, I've got to do this, and they've already had that shift. And so I would love to hear if that is you, how does that work for you? What are your thoughts, your ideas, general tips or opinions? We want to hear from you. So definitely call us or, leave a comment on our podcast page or whatever you want to do. I would love to hear more thoughts on this.
Absolutely. How are you managing your physical fitness with ADHD? We'd love to hear it.
Yes.
All right. That's it. I think that's all we have to say. Yes.
It is.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for downloading and listening. Again, jump over to Take Control ADHD on Facebook or Twitter and join the conversation there. And on behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.